I'm Desiree, this is Jordan, and we're Project Atticus. We're sailing around the world on a budget. So today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about super yachts and getting a job on a super yacht.
And we're drinking beer.
Yes,
very exciting.
So join us.
Woohoo! So guys, we wanted to talk about this today because like a big part of our belief system with Project Atticus is that if you've got a dream, you can accomplish it by just working your butt off. Dreams become reality if you introduce enough work. And so we wanted to tell you guys what work we did to put away the money in order to buy our sailboat Atticus and start cruising. So real quick, I'll tell you how I got into yachting. I graduated college at San Diego State University. I really wanted to do something adventurous with my life. I was meeting a lot of travelers at the time, and it seemed exciting. I was sailing a lot. Somebody told me I could move to Fort Lauderdale and like save money and see the world, which seemed to me like that was a lie. That must have been impossible. But the guy sold me on it. I moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Took my STCW class, which is like the introductory course that you have to take. Lived in crew houses there. Day worked for 2 to 3 months, and then moved to St. Martin in the Caribbean and continued to day work for another month before I got hired on my first permanent gig on a super yacht, and that was about a 260 footer, I believe, if I can remember correctly. So yeah, that was my introduction into super yachting, working on yachts.
Yep, and then for me, I was working in the tech world in the Silicon Valley in San Francisco. I was working at Airbnb actually, because I love traveling. And the office manager of Airbnb at the time was an ex-yachty, and so she just started kind of putting all these stories in my head of traveling around the world and getting paid for it and being in amazing places and meeting awesome people and making money actually. So eventually I quit my job, I moved to Fort Lauderdale, and I followed all the steps that we're going to go over in a couple of minutes. And I got hired on my first boat. About a year and a half later, my second boat, which was a private motor yacht, is where I met Jordan. So it was a...
And that is this one. Yeah. And we can't tell you the name. It's super, super secret. Because we signed a, what do you call it?
Like a confidentiality agreement.
Confidentiality agreement. So we cannot tell you what boat that was.
Yep. So.
Or else we'd have to kill you.
Right. So that's... So that's where I met Jordan, and we became friends, and... yeah, it was a lot of fun. So let's see. We get a ton of questions about like our experience in the past working on yachts. So we just wanted to go ahead and pound through a live stream so that you guys can refer to this later if you're interested in making a career choice, or if you just want to kind of get to know a secret world of super yachting. So yeah.
But if you want to see an awesome photo of Desiree and I after we've only been dating for like a month, boom, there you go. So this is us crossing the Atlantic. I think we literally were in the middle of the Atlantic in this photo, and the crew had a mid-Atlantic party, and so that was us just hanging out on the aft deck and enjoying the really nice weather that we were experiencing.
So thanks for saying hello, guys. Thomas Golan and Smokin' Dobberadu. But we're going to hold for questions and comments till we get through our talking points. So go ahead and ask questions, but we'll like scroll through and make sure we address all of them before we hop off the live stream. So yeah, so Jordan's going to tell us exactly what is a super yacht and who owns them.
Okay, so generally the term super yacht means a boat, a pleasure craft over 120 feet. The majority of super yachts that I've seen are all about 150 feet. Both of the boats that I worked on were well over 200, and again this one that Desiree and I met on is actually over 300 feet. That's the largest American flagged yacht in the world. So the people that own these boats are generally people you've never heard of. They more often than not own umbrella corporations that own the companies that you have heard of. So most people ask us like, oh, do you meet celebrities and stuff like that? Normally you don't. These people are so wealthy that they don't want a lot of press, and they don't want their names getting thrown around very often. They don't have that sort of vanity. So you really aren't interacting with a lot of famous people very often, but they're extremely wealthy. We're talking, billionaires generally.
All right, so before we go into the actual steps of how to get hired on a super yacht, I wanted to talk about the realities or the not fun aspects of super yachting, because a lot of people invest a lot of time and money into this dream, and they join a super yacht, they get hired for the first time, but they hate it or they lose their job quickly because they're not ready for the realities of the lifestyle. So we're going to go ahead and hop into the cons of super yachting really quickly, and the first one is that you have to work really, really, really hard, and you cannot have an attitude at all. And also, the Monkey Rock is talking about he doesn't like cutting his hair. You also have to just understand that, like, you are a pawn, and so you will look how they want you to look.
Yeah, in fact, I never really enjoyed wearing hair gel at that part of my life, and at one point they've made me. They said, you need to start wearing hair gel all the time.
Yeah.
My hair was too fluffy for them.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah. So Jordan always likes to say...
Oh, yeah, so this is like the big thing that people don't realize if you want to work on these yachts, and that's just leave your dignity at the door. Because you don't control your life anymore. I mean, they tell you what to do at all times. And you have to be able to just take it. Just shut your mouth and take it. And if you're not down for that sort of thing, like, to be honest, I don't think Desiree and I are into that anymore. Like, I don't think either of us could do that anymore.
Yeah.
But at the time, it suited our purposes because you do get a lot of perks, which we'll go into in a minute. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you're even considering it, realize you've just got to be able to put up with a whole lot of crap and not put up a stink about it.
Yeah, and actually, in regards to the Monkey Rock's comment about not wanting to cut your hair, once we got out of super yachting, Jordan grew out a man bun, and I shaved the side of my head. We were, like, rebelling against the system.
And I've never clean shaven since because I hated doing that every day.
All right, so the second con of super yachting is you have a freaking crazy schedule, so that's long hours and absolutely no holidays.
That's right. And I mean, by no holidays, it's like, hey, boss, like, my sister's getting married, or my brother's having a baby, or, like, you know, my entire family is throwing a party for me and I need to be there. Like, none of that is acceptable. It is 100% expected that you are just giving up your life to work on these boats. If you work on a boat for about a year or more, it is conventional that you get a month off every year after you've worked there for a year. So you do get time off, but it's not when you want it, it's when they give it to you. And beyond that kind of month off, you just don't get anything, generally.
And as for the long hours, there's two different kinds of yachts that you can work for. One of them is a private yacht, and a lot of times that's owned by a family, and they come on maybe 3 or 4 times a year, probably for a week or 2 at a time, and you're working really, really hard when they're on board, but the rest of the year you have kind of a normal schedule, so like a 9 to 5, get the boat clean, you go out to a bar, you know, go rock climbing, do whatever you want in your free time. And then the other kind of boat is the charter boat, and that is, you know, they're renting their boat out to people who can pay the money as often as they can, so a lot of times you're working 14-hour days for like 2 or 3 months at a time, so it's a lot of really, really hard work. You barely have time to eat or sleep. It's crazy.
And like when I hear people telling me like, oh, I work really long hours, like, on yachts you actually work a 14-hour day. Now, you don't have to cook for yourself, you don't have to do your own dishes, I mean, you got to wipe your own butt. I will say you do have to do that, but besides that, I mean, they try to provide everything for you so that you can just work all the time. There's no reason for you not to. So that is kind of one of the problems with that industry.
Yep. Okay, so we'll go into the third con of yachting. And just for you guys who just signed on, we're going to go through our little outline real quick and come to your questions after we get through everything. So let's see. The last major con of working on a super yacht is you have a complete loss of personal space. So you're living in a cabin with a roommate that's like super, super teeny. You're eating with 12 people at a time. You're working with your boss.
And one of those 12 people is your boss.
Yeah.
So like you get off of work and you're frustrated and you're angry at how your boss just acts like you don't know what you're talking about, or that you're lazy or something, and then there he is,
right there,
while you're eating dinner, trying to enjoy yourself.
Yeah. So I'm a huge introvert. So for me, when I was in yachting, I really had to force myself to be okay with being with a lot of people all the time. And then a side note about losing your personal space and being around a lot of people is if you're in a relationship, it is really difficult, especially a long distance relationship where you're not on the same boat together. It is almost impossible to stay that way. Like there's so many kind of just amazing people surrounding you, and you bond really quickly. So it's really hard to maintain a relationship off the boat.
Yeah, very true. Well, and then the other thing I was going to say is one anecdote. When I first got on my first yacht, being totally new to the industry, I got the worst situation. So I was working nights, doing anchor watches and stuff like that. And so I actually had to hot bunk. So there were 2 people living in this one room, 1 on each bunk. And then when they woke up, I would actually take that bunk during the day and sleep in it during the day. So there was 3 of us sleeping in one room with 2 beds.
Crazy.
Pretty gnarly.
So one of you guys, Roger53 says, well, you guys signed up for it, just saying. So that brings us to our next point, which is
all the awesome stuff about working on yachts.
So yeah, essentially, your life is one huge adventure. You're never living the same day after day. You're surrounded by amazing people who you really become close to because you're just forced into stressful situations with them. You're going to the most beautiful places in the world on somebody else's dime. And it's just, you'll never run out of yachting stories. The stories that you get from working on yachts will last you a lifetime. It's incredible.
I mean, I even remember, like, there were times where I would wake up and the captain would say, you got to go ashore and grab, some asparagus. Like, we need asparagus right now. So I'd take the dinghy in and then realize that I don't know what country I'm in. And I don't know what language I need to speak when I get there. I mean, in what world do you find yourself in that situation? So that sort of like, just serendipitous travel, constant travel is really cool.
Yeah. So the other major pro reason to work on a super yacht is the tips and the salary. So it's a really unique career or job where you can come in with literally no skills, invest like $1,000 for one course of training, and then you're getting paid anywhere between, I don't know, $1,000 and $2,000 a month. And then you've got tips, and then you've got health insurance. And it's just insane how much money you can really save up if you want to.
Do you want to show the image of your tip?
Oh, yes. So
boom.
Yeah. People always ask me, what's the biggest tip you've ever gotten? And this happened to be on my birthday. We got off of a charter, and I made $5,000 in cash, and then it was my birthday, so the chef made me a chocolate cake, and then the chief stew gave me a bottle of champagne. So like $100 bottle of champagne. So it was amazing, and I was just like, had to take a picture of the 3 things right there. I got my cake, got my champagne, got my money. So yeah, the tips are awesome. And then also, I have linked in the description below information on exactly how much you can make as a deckhand, as a chief stew, as a captain, as an engineer. But just by word of mouth, some of my friends a lot of our friends are still in yachting, but not only is the salary good when you start off, but if you actually put the hard work in and hold out to like get a higher position, like the chief stew, you can make up to $100,000 or more on a yacht. So,
but you can also spend the rest of your life not really having a life. So, I mean, we just got to say right at the beginning, there are pros and there are cons. Yeah. So you can't weigh one more heavily than the other.
And Jordan mentioned this briefly before, but it kind of goes along to, if you have a dream that you're trying to save up for and you're smart about saving money, you can really save a lot of money. So you don't have to pay for your clothes. All your toiletries are covered. The first boat I walked on, they take you on your like crew tour. They open up the big toiletry cabinet, and it's just like all this stuff, anything you could ever want. Your food is paid for and made by amazing chefs, and it's freaking delicious. So yeah, you can really stash away a lot of money if you wanted to.
So you want to do anecdotes?
Yeah, so, again, along the lines of, like, never running out of a story to tell because you're living this huge adventure, we just thought we'd tell you a couple of, like, kind of crazy scenarios that we both had. So, Jordan, you can kick things off.
Yeah, just one of my... like this is just a good example of you just wake up in the morning and you see what everyone's already up to, and you get involved in the day's activities. And one of the things that I love, just it was such a great day. I woke up, captain says, all right, get in the tender, we're in the Bahamas. This was, yeah, it's a 200 and I think it was a 40-foot yacht. I can't actually remember the exact size. That was it's now called Motor Yacht Titania, if you guys want to look it up. I'm allowed to talk about that one. Anyway, I get into the dinghy, and we're going through this super sketchy little like pass that was really shallow in the Bahamas, and that captain was a really ballsy captain and was constantly putting this massive boat into like super sketchy situations. And so what I was doing was literally taking the tender and just doing sort of a survey. So doing a little swerve pattern in front of the big yacht to get a look at the depths, and then I would radio in, letting the captain know, you know, what the depths were. And then I also had one of those flipper tube things where you look into the water and you can see underwater really clearly. And I'd like let them know where the reef was, like started and ended and stuff like that. And I mean, that was like just another day's work, just like working our way through this really beautiful little archipelago in the Bahamas. I think that was in the Exumas.
Yeah, and we actually have a photo of Jordan on one of the tenders. I think we were in Italy at that time because you got these big cliffs. Oh no, that wasn't Italy.
Yeah, that's that's somewhere. But yeah, that's actually not a Riva. It's some sort of a Riva knockoff that's made in Italy, that tender, and they're really not designed for open ocean cruising whatsoever. So they were really tender boats, but they were actually designed for like the Venetian canals, I believe.
Yeah,
anyway.
So you're like, it's funny because you're ordered by your captain to do the most ridiculous things. Like Jordan would do depth tests every morning. You just jump in the water and go under the boat and hold it and be like, yep, the keel came up to here on me.
Yeah, we literally had to do that a couple times. Like I would swim down when we're at anchor, and the captain would be like, how much room do we really have below the keel? And I'd swim down and like hold the propeller, the bottom of the propeller, this massive propeller is larger than I am, and I'd hold it and then put my feet on the bottom and swim back up and be like, yeah, the bottom of the prop's at my waist pretty much, you know?
Or like one time Jordan was telling me they were, I don't know if you were at anchor or what, but he saw this huge starfish in like crystal clear water, and he was just casually like, hey captain, check that out. And what did Guy say?
Yeah, this is that same captain that's just awesome. Guy O'Connor, man. He is the dude. But, yeah, he sees this starfish, and we're in like 40, 50 feet of water, and I was a pretty good free diver at the time. And I said, check out that massive starfish. He's like, hey, go get it. The guests will love it. And so I literally just swam down, grabbed this giant starfish. We got a huge, like plastic tub, filled it with sand and seawater, and turned it into a little aquarium and just started like collecting sea life to put into this thing. We put it all back and none of it was harmed, but I mean, one of those weird things, like that was my job for that day, was find specimens to add to the aquarium, you know?
Yeah. All right, so now that we've convinced you that super yachting is awesome, we're going to talk about how you actually get a job on a super yacht. Somebody was asking if there's age discrimination.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah,
there's every kind of discrimination you could imagine.
Yeah,
actually.
like your CV is like you have to include a headshot. You will not get hired without a headshot. Tattoos are bad. I've heard you have a better luck getting hired if you put that you're single on there.
You can't smoke, and if you do, you gotta cigarettes. If you do, you gotta keep it a secret and be really secretive about it, which happens a lot.
Yeah. So anyways, first things first, if you want to get into yachting, the first thing you have to do is your research. So there's a book that I would highly recommend. It's called The Insider's Guide to Becoming a Super Yacht Stewardess. And it works as well for deckhands if you want to be on the exterior. The information is still relevant. And her website is workonayacht.com. And she just has all this amazing information. If you just read that book, like, you'll be able to get a job like that. Okay, excuse me. So, and then once you're, I guess the next thing is once you decide that you're really, really into super yachting, like I was, my friend gave me this book as a gift, and I read it secretly in bed. I didn't tell anyone because I was just kind of embarrassed, or I didn't know it was like a real career. So I read it cover to cover in one sitting, and then I just moved to Fort Lauderdale. So the next step is if you want to become a yacht crew, you have to dedicate. You just have to jump in. You can't have any possessions or relationships, anything holding you back. You need to commit fully.
And that means actually moving to one of the yachting hubs in the world. Really, there's two main yachting hubs in the world, and that is in the States, you have Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and then in the Mediterranean, you have a place called Antibes, France. Those two places are where all the action is, like the business, the hiring for the most part, everything. Particularly if you're starting out. If you've got a resume you've been in the industry for a while, you can get a job all over the place. But if you're starting out, you've got to go to one of those two places. If it's Fort Lauderdale, you want to be there in October for the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. That's when a lot of boats lose their crew and they're hiring more people. And that's actually one of the reasons why it's relatively easy to get into this industry, because there's a huge amount of changeover. These jobs are really hard, and like most people, literally most people quit. Like they don't like them after a month or two, and then those that make it a season, a lot of them quit after the season. And so there's a tremendous amount of changeover. Not to mention the whole living with your boss thing makes it so that most yachties consider 1 year on a boat a long time, because you want to murder these people after a while. You know what I mean? So you change boats constantly. So there's a lot of turnover, and that's why it's relatively doable to get into this industry. So move to one of those two main hubs during their changeover season.
And I've actually linked to a hiring season chart for Fort Lauderdale in the description below. So it'll tell you month by month how likely it is that you'll get hired that month. So in Fort Lauderdale, another good hiring season is April, May, and then towards December, like, because they're getting ready to do their trips for Christmas and New Year's. All right, so let's see what else.
And real quick, Marco's asking, who's the author to that book that you're recommending?
Oh, her name is like Julie Giles or something. I'll have to look it up, but I have linked to her book down below in the description, so take a look at that.
There you go.
And then so once you're in Fort Lauderdale, you're going to want to take your STCW, which is a full course. It teaches you about seamanship, first aid. You do a firefighting course. They go a little bit into like the etiquette of super yachting. And then you're going to want to get your ENG1, which is essentially just like $100 doctor's appointment. And there's only one guy in Fort Lauderdale who does it. I think it's one guy in all of Florida who's qualified to give an ENG1.
And it's a racket, but it's just making sure that you're physically fit to work at sea. So yeah, the STCW is a week-long course, costs about $1,000. ENG1 takes an hour, takes you 2 hours to wait in the waiting room, and then it takes you a couple minutes for him to just make sure that your heart's still pumping blood.
And then they shoot you out the door.
Yeah.
And then the STCW costs about $1,000 a week. And then while you're doing your STCW, Jordan's going to tell you where you're going to be living.
That's right, I sure am. So one of the more interesting things about this industry is that there are crew houses, an abundant number of crew houses in both Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and in Antibes, France, as well as some other places like St. Martin in the Caribbean, which I spent some time looking for a job there. So crew houses are essentially hostels, but without so much like designed towards having a good time. They're really just apartments where they've installed bunk beds, and you get, a lot of people living in this one house or apartment for really cheap and short-term leases. And the great thing about moving into a crew house is that you can pretty much show up knowing nothing about the yachting industry, and you're going to be surrounded by people who have been trying to get a job for a couple months, most likely. So you're going to get to know people who've already learned a whole lot. And to be honest, I moved to Fort Lauderdale with no idea what to expect. And within, a couple weeks, I had a really good understanding of what was going to be going on, just because I was meeting people in the crew house. So
I would say it's important to network while you're living in the crew house. At the same time, try not to get sucked into that party culture, because a lot of people just live in the crew house for like a year, and they make just enough money to keep you know, living there in this kind of like alternate universe. And if that's what you want, it's a fun year-long adventure, I guess. But if you actually want to work on a super yacht, you have to you just have to actually get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and dock walk and actually try to get jobs. You can go out and party and have fun, and a lot of people get jobs in a bar actually. But you just need to not get sucked into that world. That's really important. And the other thing I was going to say is when you're doing your STCW, you have to recognize, and even not even just the STCW, when you're networking, when you're at a bar, when you're at your STCW, when you're at your EMG1, you have to realize that you are a walking kind of like advertisement. Like everybody is judging you, and so you have to put your best foot forward. So it's so easy to get there, just get really, really drunk, make a fool of yourself, and then you have to show your face again the next day and try to get hired. Nobody's going to want to hire you if that's the case. So for my STCW class, I was the only person in my class who I had a watch on. I wore a white collared shirt, khaki pants, and then closed-toed, like white kind of dorky shoes. And I was the biggest dork in my class.
That's classic Desiree.
Yes, and
classic
it was a
Desiree.
little bit awkward, and I was like, oh, why did I do this? Because everyone else is like, you know, in tank tops and like, you know, sitting on their chairs like this, and I'm like taking notes, asking questions. But I did get hired first in that class. I got hired the day the class got out because the instructor and the receptionist were like, you need to work in this industry because you know what it's all about. So, like,
whereas I got hired pretty drunk with my shirt off at a party in St. Martin. That was how I got hired to my very first yacht gig.
It took Jordan about 2 months to get hired.
I had been trying for 3 months,
yeah,
and doing day work enough to provide for myself. So I was not losing money. In fact, I was actually putting a little bit away with the day work. But the point is that yes, you need to be professional. But the other way of looking at it is, yachties drink a lot. Like, it's just a big part of the culture, and so parties are a big way of getting jobs and making contacts.
Mm-hmm.
So to be honest, if you do move to Fort Lauderdale or Antibes, make sure you're going to parties and meeting people, because that is a big way to.
But still show up for dock walking in the morning.
That's right.
You're there to get a job.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, a lot of people ask how to get your first job. So the best way to kind of go about that is to dock walk, and that essentially means have your CV. You have to dress. You know, get your white collared polo on.
We put our nice white shirts on just for this.
Make sure you're wearing a belt, guys. Have a watch.
And you should be clean shaven.
Clean shaven.
Look unacceptable.
Yeah, look like you're going to be working that day. Get there early in the morning, like 6:37. Walk from dock to dock and just knock on the door, stand at the passerelle, and say, hey, I'm new to this industry. Here's my CV. I would love an opportunity to day work for you guys.
And more than often, like, you're generally, you go to the boat and there's not a door to knock on, right? It is a boat. There is a passerelle. Sometimes they'll have a little, like, ding dong bell,
like a little buzzer
ringer, little doorbell. It's like a doorbell at the passerelle. You can buzz that, and then someone's gonna roll up and be like, great, another day worker. And then what you generally would say is, hey, is a first mate available if you're looking to get into the deck department? Or if you're a cute female, you'll say, hey, is a chief stewardess available? And if they're actually looking for day workers, which they very frequently are, then the first mate or the chief stewardess will come out, take your CV, put it in the pile of other CVs, and then when they need somebody, they'll kind of look through them and give you a call.
Yeah, and there's a couple of reasons why a boat would hire somebody just for a day, and that's what day working means. That's what you're trying to get when you're dock walking. And one of the reasons is, like, if you are on a boat and it just had like 6 charters in a row and the captain is seeing that the crew is about to die, he'll give them a couple days off and then bring in a temporary crew of like green deckhands and stewardesses to do all the dirty work of flipping the boat over and getting it nice.
And when I was doing it, the common wage was $15 an hour US.
And food's included a lot of times.
Lunch,
lunch
is included.
Yeah.
So $15 an hour, but you do the worst jobs. You know what I mean? The jobs that none of the crew wants to do. So it's pretty awful work.
And just 2 tips if you're going to be out there dock walking: go early in the morning. Do not show up after like 8 o'clock. That's just rude. Never show up at like around lunchtime, because it's a burden on the chief stew and the first mate to leave their lunch and then go talk to you on the dock, because they're getting tons of day workers who want a job. So give them their space. And then also, if you see guests are on board, just keep walking. Like, don't go on the boat. Like, let them do their thing. All right, so the next thing that you want to do to get a job, you can do this at the same time as your dock walking, is sign up with a bunch of crew agents in town. There's one called Crew Unlimited that I went to, and you essentially go in, you have an interview with a crew agent, kind of sell yourself to them, give them your CV, and then when they hear of a boat captain who's looking for a position that suits you, they'll put you forward, and then they'll get a little commission for putting you in front of them.
I will say, first of all, I do want to mention sailing like hell. You're right. I have a habitual problem. I get too excited and I cut Desiree off. So I've mentioned this in the past. I want to apologize for everybody. It's definitely a problem that I have. I'm working on it.
All right.
But I did want to say, though, I'm sorry, but I did want to say that is really funny.
Yeah.
But if you're a guy, you can, and you've never worked on a boat before, you can pretty much just not join the not crew networks. What were you saying?
Agencies.
The crew agencies. The crew agencies are there for people that have a little bit of value to bring from the beginning. And so if you're an attractive female, that's value in the yachting world. You know what I mean? This industry is extremely vain. You know what I mean? And they're big about that sort of thing. So if you're an attractive female, yes, you can go to the crew agencies and they'll help you. If you're a guy trying to get onto the deck department, I don't think I knew a single guy.
I did.
How many?
Like 3 at least.
Okay, she knew 3, I knew 0 that actually got a job through crew agency.
Well, the one that I know of was a big flirt, so I think he just flirted with his crew agents, and then they loved him. So
maybe if you're really charming.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to open up the floor for questions. So I'm just going to kind of scroll up and see what questions we have. So Sailing Like Hell asks, what is a mega yacht? And so mega yacht, super yacht, and yacht are kind of all the same in the same category.
Mega yacht is like this vague term that's generally larger than a super yacht. So I think that the boat we met on, over 300 feet, you could probably call that a mega yacht. Yeah. But it's just like even bigger. And they're making them bigger every single year. Like the boat that was the biggest in the world when we were working still is now ranked like number 5 probably. Like they're building bigger boats all the time. Especially since like people in Russia, like a lot of the plutocrats in Russia, like they need to get their money laundered, you know what I mean? So a lot of these really, really wealthy Russians, and even a lot of the Saudis too, like they're building these massive boats, and it's so hard on the books to like really prove how much they cost, and so it's just a great way to launder your money.
Yeah, so Bill Connelly, hello to you as well. Marco250 says, love the channel, you guys, thanks. What was your jobs on the yacht? Deckhand, mate? So I started off as just the lowest stewardess. By the time I met Jordan, I was the 3rd stewardess on a 315-foot yacht. So kind of moved up the chain a little bit. And then once we we met on a super yacht, and then Jordan convinced me to quit. And then he said, let's buy a sailboat and sail around the world. And I said, okay. But once we did that, we thought we had saved up enough money, but we hadn't. So in the middle of our Boatyard refit, we ran out of money. So I actually went back to yachts, and I did a lot of day work in Mexico, in the Caribbean, Fort Lauderdale. I don't remember where else I went. But whenever I did day work, I was always a second stew. So that's one step down from the chief stewardess, who is kind of like the top of the interior line as the hierarchy goes.
And so I'll describe mine, but first, for a lot of you that don't have, you know, any context of what the jobs are on super yachts, there's generally 3 departments on any given big yacht. There's the deck department, interior, and then the engineering department. Interior is kind of split into housekeeping and service. So Desiree was sort of a service specialist on the boat that we were working on. I worked in the deck department, so that means that I was in charge of two different things: keeping the exterior of the boat nice and maintained, so just literally keeping it clean and doing all of the maintenance with the aesthetics and just the outside of the boat. And on top of that, we were in charge of water sports stuff. So that means the tenders on board, which, the boat we were on had 3 different tenders aboard. The other boat I worked on, same, had 3. As well as the jet skis, we had topper sailboats, little sailboats. We had stand-up jet skis. We had sea bobs. We had a water park. In fact, and that I have a picture of right here. The first boat that I worked on, we would set this bad boy up when, and this is Motor Yacht Titania. In fact, I think I'm the guy on the jungle gym on the left. That's me. But ironically, this was my last day on that boat. That's a weird thing to remember. But anyway, so we would set that entire water park up every single morning when we had guests aboard. And we could, as you can see, we have toys streaming off the end. And we would stream, the tenders, we would stream the jet skis, so everything was just hanging out there, and then as the guests wanted to do one or the other, we'd swim out there, grab it, and bring it up. So those are the 2 different responsibilities for the deck department.
Yeah. And so Thomas Golan was asking, how long is a typical contract? And somebody else was asking if the Golams are related and family. And yes, Thomas is my brother, and then Sio, who's on there, Siomara, is my mom. So, when both of us worked on 2 boats long term. So the first boat that I worked on was a year, second one was a year. And again, Jordan hit on this in the beginning, but when you're trying to get hired initially, you need to tell them that even if yachting is not your end all be all career, you need to tell them that you want to be a chief stewardess. And then after a year or 2, if you want to quit, you can. But so if you're building your resume initially, it's really good to stay on a boat for at least a year at a time. That being said, once I started doing day work when we were refitting Atticus, hey, Zingaro, cool.
Yeah, Zingaro, what's up, buddy? How's it going, man? Good to see you.
So anyways, when I was doing day work to fund Project Atticus, I told people I will only do charters and I will only do for like 2 weeks at a time because I didn't like being away from the boatyard too much.
So this is a good one. So Street Truckin' Titan was asking, have you seen the Below Deck reality show, and how realistic is it to what you've experienced? I've seen very little of it. I've seen parts of a handful of episodes. It's like realistic in its concept, you know what I mean? So the drama that they emphasize is real. And it's just as silly as in the show, right? Like the drama is created because you're in this pressure chamber. So like everyone's stressed out, especially if you're on charter, you're working all the time, you're exhausted. And so like any little personality problem or social problem that you have with somebody, like it gets exacerbated. And so there's a ton of interpersonal drama that does go on. The show is definitely like glosses over a lot of stuff, and like it's funny because you'll be watching and like you can tell like they'll be going this one way on an island that you're very familiar with, and then suddenly the next shot they're going the other way, meaning that like they're just kind of making it up generally as it goes, but you can tell that the concepts are all pretty correct, I would say.
Yeah, I've watched the show actually because one of the boats that I worked on was the boat that season 2, I believe, of Below Deck was filmed on.
Can you say what the name is?
Yeah, so that the Ohana is the original name of the boat, and Motor Yacht Ohana. So season, I think 2 and maybe 3 of Below Decks was filmed on Ohana. And I was hired by new owners who were turning the boat around, and they were giving it a new name. And the family just got really into watching the show because it happened on their boat. So they would be watching it in the main salon, and then the crew would be watching it in the crew quarters down below. And I'd be running up and down serving the owners, and then running down below to get some things done. So anyways, yeah, I have watched the show, and I think there's a lot of stigma about it. Like yachties hate saying that. Yachties love saying, oh, it's nothing like that. But if you're just somebody who has no idea about super yachting, like it is a lot like that. The only difference is like the working montages, like it's cute to just like show like you know, like you're working hard. You know what I mean? Anyways, like cool, cue the like funny working hard song and then do like a quick montage of somebody like shammying something. But in reality, like that's your day. You're living this like monotonous job of like cleaning all day. So that's what I would say about the show.
Yeah. And so California Kayaker said, did you already talk about certification? So yeah, just that first, it's STCW standards and, oh boy, I can't, shouldn't open up that can of worms. Can't remember what the acronym stands for. But STCW, $1,000, week-long course. You take that, and that's pretty much all that you need. Some boats will require you do some other just random stuff, and you can, but to work at sea, you know what I mean, like offshore, you just need the STCW.
Yeah. I just want to say, hey, Dave, thanks for tuning in. You've been to all 3 of our live streams so far.
Yeah, rock on.
Awesome.
Totally.
Well, it doesn't look like we have many questions more about super yachting. So do you guys have any other questions about, you know, Mexico? Or I guess we could talk a little bit about the decision that we're facing now with our itinerary.
Can I tell a story?
Sure. Jordan wants to tell a story.
Beer number 3. It's time for a story. So first of all, can we get a cheers, please? Cheers, everybody. Man, good to have you. Okay. So, one of my favorite stories to tell from my yachting experience is, this is the cat cake story. This is going to be a good one. So, sorry, if we seem like we're fidgeting a lot, it's because the mosquitoes are really starting to come out in, hey, Bill, how's it going, man?
And Rob S.
Yeah.
Matchbox 20.
Yeah, right. But anyway, so here we are. I was off the coast of Antibes, France. I'm sorry, it was actually Villefranche. So it was a little bit to the west of like Nice and Antibes. And the boat's at anchor. This was on Motor Yacht Apoys, now known as Motor Yacht Titania, the one that I showed you before. And we're about to pick our guests up. They're coming in like, you know, the next couple of hours. They're going to be on the boat for 10 days or so. And it's a big deal when you pick the guests up, right? Like everyone's standing there in their epaulets, like at attention. Like they put on a whole production. Well, the captain was one of the coolest captains I ever worked with. And it happened to be the chief stewardess's birthday that night. And the captain really liked the chief stewardess. So he comes up to me, and he's this old school American captain. He's like, hey, Jordan, I got a job for you. I want you to take the tender and drive back to Antibes to get a cake for Kat's birthday. I'm like, guy, like, we're picking up the guests from the Nice airport in the next, like, hour or so. I don't have nearly enough time. It's going to take me an hour and a half just to slog back to Antibes. Just to do that. It's going to take me a while to get a cake and then an hour and a half back. Like, it's going to take me forever. He's like, yeah, I don't care. As well, I want the cake to look like a cat because it's Kat's birthday. The chief stewardess's name was Kat. Anyway, Desiree wants me to get this going faster. But I ride this tender by myself, cruising along the southern coast of France, like as fast as this thing will take me. It takes me an hour and a half to get back to Antibes. I go into town, go to where there's a handful of little bakery shops all right next to each other, and I start going from one to another, and I don't speak French at all. And before I had left, I told the captain that. I said, guy, I don't speak French. He's like, listen, I don't care if you have to meow to get them to make you a cat cake. I want a cat cake. So I'm like going from bakery to bakery, literally meowing. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't speak French. Like, I want a cake that looks like a cat. And they just stare at me. I'm like, meow. You know? And like, they kind of get it, but like say, no, we don't do that. I draw pictures, you know? And so then finally I got to this one bakery, and it was like the last one on the street. And they're like, yeah, okay. The daughter luckily spoke some English. And so I literally was working with her, like how we could make it look more like a cat, because they'd never done that before. I get the cat cake, they make it, I get back to the tender, I run back, get in, like try and like put the cake in a way, because it's a choppy day. Like there's a lot of chop out there. And so the boat's gonna be slamming on my way back. So I try and like put this thing in the chain locker with like a bunch of towels so it won't get destroyed. Book it back, barely make it before they have to like head off to Italy or something. I mean, I don't even know where we were planning on going, but they were waiting for me for the cat cake. And luckily, I made it back. Kat, the chief stewardess, had a wonderful birthday, and we ended up having a decent charter. But I mean, that's gotta be one of the more strange experiences of my life, you know, like trying to like rush to some French town to find a cat cake.
Yeah, it's a good story. Well, like I said, seems like we got through everyone's questions, so we're gonna stay online for about 15 more minutes, but let's just bring it back to sailing and Project Atticus. So right now, Jordan and I are in Isla Mujeres, and we're trying to decide if we should try to book it over to Panama to try to cross the Pacific this year, or if we should spend a season in the Caribbean. I know Zingaro is in Panama right now, so are you guys planning on crossing this year? And then also, like, what do you guys think? We're trying to kind of weigh the pros and cons. I know some of our patrons were talking about different options, like the Bahamas. Heather mentioned going over to the Sea of Cortez as well. Jordan mentioned today going to Venezuela. No.
I mean, I was even considering going to Brazil from, well, we'll see. We got a lot of options, so we'd be curious to see what you guys think.
Yeah. Oh, Sailing Like Hell says, why didn't the chef make the cake? Yeah, that's a good question.
Good question. I think it was just because he didn't have enough time because we were picking up the charter. Mm. Yeah, exactly. So the chef, just like everybody else, is super, super busy once guests actually come on the boat. So because we were picking up that day, there was no way that the chef could make the cake in time. I mean, yeah, in fact, like the girls, the interior department would help the chef a lot, like doing whatever's going on for the meals. And I learned very early on to not even go up there when things were, when the meal was getting made, because dude, like tensions were high. Mm-hmm. Like the anxiety level was high in that kitchen. So yeah. The chefs are super, super busy when there's an actual charter.
Yeah, and I guess one kind of like something to think about if you're wanting to get into yachting is there's kind of like a roller coaster of how much work you're putting in based on the circumstances. So, for example, when we're in the Boatyard, the deckhands are usually doing like kind of the dirty work. So they're doing a lot of the painting and sanding, and if there's any, I don't know if you guys did fiberglass work, but a lot of the like nitty gritty work. And they're usually sometimes working longer hours. Versus when we're on charter, that's when the interior department is working really, really hard. Yeah. So, there's always this like contention between the interior department and the deck department. So the deck department just kind of learns, like, if you're in the kitchen or the galley, like, you're not allowed to be laughing because we're working so hard, like, get out of here. So I know what he's talking about, and it's like, that was kind of our time to shine when we had guests aboard. We were just working. And then I remember on the boat that we met on, we had the full security force come on board, a masseuse, a personal trainer, and so they would hang out down below and play like cribbage. Meanwhile, I'd be coming through like with 2 hours, or I don't know, probably realistically like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and I'd just be glaring at these guys like playing cribbage. I'm like, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. So it's kind of like this unwritten rule when you're on charter and you're not working. Like, you better be hiding because like the culture of the boat is like you need to be sweating and like just like putting everything you have into it. Otherwise, like, you're gonna get some nasty looks.
Yeah. But Jolene is here. Jolene is Desiree and my chief stew from back in the day.
Yeah,
so hey,
yeah.
Jolene.
And so that goes along the lines of, we were talking about one of the pros of working on a super yacht is you build these like really strong connections. So Jolene actually came to Mexico last month, and she was a bridesmaid in my wedding. So yeah, we're really close, and she's awesome. I'm glad she's here. Yeah. Let's see what else. Well, you wanna talk about what we're gonna talk about next week?
Yeah, sure. So if you guys have any more comments, this is or questions, I should say, or comments, this is the last opportunity, and then we'll start wrapping things up. But next week is going to be exciting. I'm going to talk about my five favorite books for preparing to cruise. So if you are considering cruising in the near future and that's something that you're looking into and wanting to research more, I'm going to give you my top 5 book choices. I love researching this stuff. Like, it's getting to the point now where it's hard for me to find more books to read. But there, for those 3 years while we were in Key West refitting Atticus, I was able to consume a lot of cruising literature, and I'd love to share with you guys my thoughts on it all. We're going to get more into, live streams that talk more about direct sailing issues and more sailing topics. But we do want to wait until the episodes that we're displaying every week are kind of starting to catch more up into our cruising lifestyle. So
I'm just going to interrupt. So Dave had a good point. He said, it seems like a lot of YouTube sailors are rushing to go through the canal, almost like it's a race. There's a lot of places to visit before the Caribbean. And I would say you're right. I think, like, for me...
Where did you say?
Yeah. Dave. And so for me, particularly, I think it is kind of like this pride thing. Like, I want to be like, I am circumnavigating, and I can show you because we're going across the Pacific this year. And I watched this documentary called Beyond the West Horizon. And it's a documentary of the Hiscox crossing the, actually circumnavigating. But the part of the movie that I'm just like so captivated by is when they're in French Polynesia. And like, I just want to be there like right now. So it's a good point though. There's a lot to see.
Man, Dave, that is such a good point. Like, I mean, I think a part of it is that a lot of these sailing channels want to kind of up the ante a little bit. I know for certain for Desiree and I, and we keep talking about this because we talk to a lot of our cruising friends here in Isla Mujeres about this a lot, and that is, we're a little bit sick of being somewhere where people keep telling us like, man, you should have been here 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like, this place was so cool 10 or 15 years ago. We hear that everywhere we go. I mean, even Cuba, which we want to go back to Cuba, and if we do stay in the Caribbean, just like you were saying, Dave, like, stay off the beaten path. Like, Cuba to me is off the beaten path, and if we stay in the Caribbean, we may spend most of our time in Cuba. We'll see. Mm-hmm. But the point being, the South Pacific, it seems like you can find places that are still relatively untouched. And the other thing that is attractive to me about it is that we meet a lot of cruisers here in Isla Mujeres who are just not as committed to like cruising hardcore as we are. Like, we bought an extremely seaworthy boat and refit her to be extremely seaworthy. And it's a little bit of a letdown to be surrounded by a lot of boaters who are on boats that like really shouldn't go out to sea at all. You know what I mean? And like, if you wait for that perfect weather window, you can make it down to most places in the Caribbean, with a relatively acceptable safety margin. Whereas the South Pacific, that's just not the case. I mean, you have to be prepared.
Yeah. Although Rob S. has a good point. He says, stay and smell the roses. The Marquesas Islands in South Pacific are a bit overrated. Unprotected anchorages, pricey living, even for a cruiser. So it's possible that we've just got this delusion in our head and we think like most humans, like, once we get to this goal, everything's going to be great. So we are aware of that. And so realistically, we have a lot of work to do before we leave Isla Mujeres, work for other people and then work on our own boat. So I think we're kind of both leaning towards sticking around for a season, not in Isla Mujeres. We actually saved up enough money to start moving again. So we'd like to definitely hit southern Cuba because it's, as we understand, at least the snorkeling is very still relatively untouched. And then we were talking today about the Dominican Republic and trying to go to places that a lot of cruisers don't traditionally go to. And we're actually not super interested in doing like St. Martin, the BVIs, because we did that when we were working. So we kind of want to see other things. Yeah, we worked there and we got to experience a lot of it, but we, the Lesser Antilles for the most part, I'd like to stay away from.
But yeah, I mean, especially we were talking about just circumnavigating Cuba if we stay here for a season. What do you guys think about that? I'd be curious. I mean, it seems like, especially right now, like the geopolitical situation that the Caribbean is in, Cuba seems to me like the very most interesting place. So I'd be curious what you guys think about that. But no, Rob, I do want to say, Rob S., that's such a great point. Thanks for saying that. Just kind of bringing some reality back into my world. You know what I mean? I probably really do romanticize the South Pacific, which, I mean, gosh, even the word, right? South Pacific. Like, I've read too much Jack London and Melville and, you know, all that stuff to not romanticize it at this point.
Yeah. But California Kayaker says, love the refit. You did it right. Thank you. We worked and sweated a lot. Yeah, what else? Avoid the Galapagos. You know, we've heard that the Galapagos is super expensive. And is that what you're talking about, sailing like hell? Is it the price, or is it actually what you see once you're there?
Well, I think it's expensive, and I've also heard that it's you're not actually at an advantage being on a boat, is what I've heard.
$2,000 check-in fee. No, can't go to the Galapagos. Yeah.
Wow. I'll have to look into that. I did not know it was that high. Yeah. Gnarly.
Venezuela. That's a good point. We were talking about that today. Yeah.
Good shout, Alexander FDJ. What up, dude? Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We could try and do some Venezuela as well. I've been hearing some kind of like iffy things about it, but I don't like to really subscribe to that sort of hearsay stuff. I'll look into it, and if it's not looking too bad, maybe we will go to Venezuela.
And Mike L. Hawaii says the South Pacific is amazing. Just do Micronesia and not the coconut milk run. Yeah, like our goal is to kind of see the world, but also we want to be a little bit different. So we do want to try to do things that are a little bit untraditional as safely as we can on our boat. So that's a really good point. Thanks for the shout. Yeah. Point of interest, I haven't visited the Caribbean, but I can recognize many places featured on sailing channels simply because many of them visit exactly the same places. That's true, Dave. Yeah, we kind of want to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, so. But I can safely say that our interest to go to the South Pacific is not simply because we want to be doing something other sailing channels aren't. Like, I can safely say it's not related to, like, the sailing channel world on YouTube. Like, we both really want to get somewhere that's difficult to get to, and you know, the benefit or the reward equals the effort. You know what I mean? And the Caribbean is one of those, like, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's kind of turned into one of those, like, low effort, low reward kind of situations, I think. But I mean, we've seen so little of it, even though we worked in the Eastern Caribbean and we've lived here in Mexico for a while. We've still seen so little of it. So I don't want to act like I know everything. I'm just saying, generally, when I get excited about something, you know, I'm getting excited about the South Pacific.
Mike L. Hawaii says Patagonia.
Yeah, dude, Mike, good shout. I would love Patagonia. I wonder if Atticus is really ready for, like, the higher latitudes, especially the cold. You know what I mean? The hull's not insulated, and that kind of concerns me. We don't have any sort of a heater situation going. We've really designed her to be ready for the tropics more than the higher latitudes. Now, plenty of sea winds have, you know, rounded the horn, and what I'd really like to do is the Chilean archipelago over there on the west coast of South America. That's something that, similar to the South Pacific, like, it's hard to get to. Not a lot of people go there. We read Beth Leonard's account of going through there, and really that excited me a lot. But Patagonia as well, just generally, man, looks beautiful.
And Thomas Golan, my brother, and he's a chef, he's saying showcase local foods. That's a good point. And actually, Jordan had a friend from the Boatyard who doesn't speak a word of English come visit us last week, and he's going to come on board Atticus and give me a cooking lesson on how to cook pulpo, which is octopus, and then caracol, which is conch, ceviche. So we'll be sure to do a video about that. And then Street Truck and Titan says, what are a few sailing blue water boats that you would recommend for someone interested in your lifestyle? That's a good question.
Yeah. So, I mean, our boat, the Allied Seawind 30, is good, but I mean, there's so few of them. The odds that you'll actually find one that's at a good price are low. But I mean, Allied Seawind 30. Our buddy sailed all the way across the Pacific on a Cape Dory 29, I believe, and that's a great boat. It's, you know, kind of a bachelor's boat. You know, it'd be tough for 2 people to live on that full time, but if you were willing to kind of take a cut in living space, and that's a great one. Our photographer for our wedding lives on a Southern Cross 31, I believe. That's a great boat.
Can I say the West Sail?
Desiree loves West Sails.
There's Flo,
The West Sail
Snail.
32.
But they're so spacious, and there's a
Very
huge
seaworthy
community. So if you ever have any questions, they're like very, very into the West Sail culture. So you can always find people who have West Sails out there. For us, that's been a little bit of a problem because Atticus is an Allied Seawind, and I think there was only maybe like 100 catches in production. And so we've had a hard time kind of like asking people like, so are your chain plates like this or like that? So we've had to be really creative about it.
And Rob S., that's pretty cool. They've got a list of blue water boats. I'd love to check that list out. We will after the live stream.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. That's awesome.
And then Alexander says, check this out. You can come to visit Jurassic Coast in South UK. It's spectacular during the summer.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
But I mean, just to finish up that question, Street Truck and Titan, there are so many good small blue water boats out there, and the elements that go into whether they're a good blue water boat or not are it's a multitude, right? Like it's what was going on in that time period. What were the profit margins like for the boat builders? What was the vision for that one builder at that time, you know, in boat building history? I mean, the difference between a blue water boat and a coastal cruiser, there's so many things. There's so many things that you can't actually answer that in one quick description. So that's why lists like Rob just referred to are great. And, you know, that's when we bought Atticus, we saw the Seawind 30 in a list just like that, actually from a book in the public library in Sarasota, Florida. So that was one way that we decided to go with.
And, you know, we might do a live stream completely on the subject of how to pick your blue water sailboat to circumnavigate, because we get a lot of questions about that. I don't think we made the best decision with our boat, not because Atticus isn't great, but because it was like the first boat we looked at and we were super emotional and we just bought it right away.
It was the first boat that we actually went to go look at.
Right.
I had done a lot of research on what I wanted.
Yeah, but we were just so excited. So anyways, if you guys have enjoyed tonight's conversation, please text 43506 to get text notifications of any of our live streams that we have in the future. And join us.
Text the word Atticus
to
43506.
Too much wine for me.
Yes. But it's in the description down below.
Yep. And then also try to join us next week at 6 p.m. the same time. We're going to be talking about Jordan's top 5 cruising books.
Which is going to be super exciting. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we also want to send a special thank you out to our patrons. Thank you so much for enabling us to make these videos. If you guys want to consider being a patron, hop over to our page. We've got a really cool community. We've got hangouts, kind of like the more behind the scenes look. We do a video a day so you can see what our daily life is like.
And something else that we've been doing that's really exciting is we've got a Patreon Facebook group that's kind of like getting involved and helping us make a lot of the decisions on both, like, you know, how to make our videos better, but also, you know, where to go and what to see next and all that.
Hey, Ann.
So, hey, Ann, how's it going?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Ann is actually our first producer on Patreon, so we had a conversation with her for about an hour the other day and heard about crazy bears, which we won't say too much of. Your secret's safe with us. Bears and where was it? The Labrador and her sailing dream. And so yeah, it's been really fun. You guys are awesome. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you next week, same time.
That's right. And if you had a good time, please give the video a thumbs up, just as Dave/DV Zyre has been trying to push.
Yeah,
we really
thanks, Dave.
appreciate that, Dave.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and No Job, come on, where are you?
Yeah, No Job, you gotta make it next week. It's gonna be a good one. Okay.
See you guys later.
See you guys.